The whisper, sharp as broken glass, cut through the quiet hum of the family dinner. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you tacky old woman." My laugh, a brittle, unexpected sound, startled even myself. "Don't worry, dear," I said, a tremor in my voice I hoped only I could feel, as Cedric, my husband of 43 years, stared fixedly at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. He'd barely looked at me in weeks. Something was dying inside me, but it wasn't my resolve. It was the last thread of naive certainty about the life I thought I'd built. You here follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has. At that family dinner, my daughter-in-law leaned in close, her perfume cloying, her tone low and cruel. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you tacky old woman," she whispered, her lips barely moving, but her words cutting straight through me like glass. For a moment, the world stood still. And then, somehow, I laughed. A clear, sharp sound that bounced off the crystal glasses and gilded walls like it belonged to someone else. I looked her in the eye and said evenly, "Don't worry, dear." She thought she'd won, but weeks later I gave her a surprise that would leave her hollow and shattered, and I felt no remorse. I'd been married to Cedric for 43 years. That's more than 4 decades of shared routines, warm cups of tea in the mornings, and the kind of quiet only possible between people who no longer need words to understand one another. At 65, I believed I had seen every side of my husband, our son Judd, and the life we had built in our grand old colonial house. I truly believed that nothing could surprise me anymore. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening, late September. The dining room glowed in soft amber light, filtered through the chandelier Cedric had given me for our 20th anniversary. It sparkled over the mahogany table, laid out with china that once belonged to my grandmother. The silverware was polished, the crystal goblets catching the glow, like frozen stars. It should have been a beautiful evening, family gathered, my son and his wife sitting down to a home-cooked meal. But beneath the elegance, something dark and uneasy rippled. Lilia sat directly across from me, her long blonde hair pulled tightly back in her usual severe bun. Her green eyes missed nothing. She was 28, younger than my son by 15 years, and from the moment she joined our family, I sensed something dangerous, a predator in designer heels. She studied people, not to know them, but to exploit them. And tonight she practically shimmered with a radiant confidence. But it wasn't the glow of maternal joy, it was sharper, like a blade flashing in the sun. She rested her hand on her still flat stomach with a performative delicacy, as if calling attention without saying a word. Judd, sweet, trusting Judd, was lost in his steak, slicing each bite with the kind of precise focus he brought to everything in life. He had always believed the best in people. His dark hair still fell across his brow the same way it had when he was 10. And Cedric, my Cedric, sat at the head of the table, impeccably groomed, silver hair neatly combed. His blue eyes were distant, locked on his food. He hadn't looked at me, not truly, in weeks. "You've outdone yourself again, Bessie," Judd said warmly, motioning toward the roast I'd prepared with care. "This is incredible." I smiled, but it felt stiff, foreign. The food turned to ash in my mouth. The air in the room held a quiet building pressure, like the sky just before a thunderstorm. "Mother Bessie is such a wonderful cook," Lilia chimed in, her voice drenched in false sweetness. "Such a devoted wife and mother, it's truly inspiring." The way she drew out the word devoted made my skin tighten. Still, I gave her a polite nod. "Thank you, dear." She dabbed at her lips, her smile small and secretive. "I've been thinking a lot about devotion lately. About vows, those promises to stay loyal through sickness, health, better or worse." Her gaze burned right into mine. I could see the sparkle of cruelty hiding behind those glittering green eyes. Cedric's fork clinked against his plate. The sound rang out louder than it should have. "That's lovely, sweetheart," Judd said, reaching over to squeeze her hand, completely unaware. "Marriage is about commitment, building something together." "Oh yes," Lilia said, not looking at him now, but at me. "Or sometimes, sharing what's already been built." My breath caught, my heart pounded harder, even though I didn't yet know what I was reacting to. It was her tone. Cedric's silence. Something vile was coming. I felt it in my bones. "I have some news," Lilia announced suddenly. Her voice sliced through the tension like a knife through silk. "Something that will change everything for our family." Judd sat up straighter, his face glowing with hope. "What is it?" Lilia stood, her movements graceful, measured. She smoothed her dress, a show for all of us. Then she said it. "I'm pregnant." Her words hit like a thunderclap. I saw Judd's face change first. He was elated. He stood, pulled her into his arms. "Lilia, that's wonderful." He turned towards Cedric and me, smiling so hard his cheeks dimpled. "Mom, Dad, you're going to be grandparents." I should have been overjoyed. I should have cried happy tears, embraced her, started planning for baby showers and knit blankets. But instead, something cold and sharp settled in my gut. Because as Judd held her, Lilia looked past him, right at Cedric. And the look on her face was not one of shared joy. It was victory. "Congratulations," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. Judd moved to pour champagne, bubbling over with excitement. Lilia, meanwhile, strolled slowly around the table, her movements theatrical, almost taunting. She stopped beside me, leaned in as if to kiss my cheek, and whispered the words that would echo through my nights for weeks. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you old fool." The room spun. I clutched the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. But instead of breaking down, I heard myself laugh. It was bright, clear, controlled. "Don't worry, dear," I said. "Everything will work out just fine." She pulled back, startled. That wasn't the reaction she expected. She wanted a scene, a breakdown. Instead, I had given her poise. And maybe that unnerved her more than a slap in the face would have. But across the table, Cedric still wouldn't look at me. That told me more than any confession ever could. Something inside me, some deep ancient faith in my marriage, cracked and then crumbled. Judd was still speaking, making toasts, dreaming aloud about the future. His innocence was a blade of its own, cutting deeper with every hopeful word. How long had this been happening? How many lies had I swallowed without even tasting them? I raised my glass. I smiled. I played the role expected of me, even as my world silently turned to ash. The rest of the dinner passed like a scene from a movie I wasn't really in. I nodded at the right moments. I smiled when I was meant to. I pretended. And then they left. Judd was bubbling with ideas about cribs and savings accounts. Lilia gave me one final smug glance, the kind that said, "I've won." I stood in the kitchen, methodically placing dishes in the washer. My hands moved automatically. I was numb. Cedric appeared behind me, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn. "Bess," he started, voice raspy. "Not tonight," I said, still facing the sink. "I can't. Not tonight." He stood there a moment, then sighed and walked upstairs, up to the bedroom we had shared for 43 years, but I didn't follow. I stayed in the kitchen, alone, surrounded by the broken pieces of a life I once thought I understood. Had changed. Slower, more deliberate, as if the brief encounter had drained something from him, or given him something he didn't want me to see. I stood there, hidden behind those gauzy curtains, feeling like a ghost in my own life. My breath was shallow, my pulse hammering with a quiet kind of dread I couldn't shake. I tried to distract myself, tried to pull my thoughts away from the spiraling doubt that coiled Tatham with every passing minute. But everything in the house reminded me of them, of the garden Cedric loved, of Lilia's perfume lingering faintly in the hallway, of the breakfast I had prepared that morning with hands that had trembled just slightly as I cut the toast. Every drawer I opened, every cushion I fluffed, felt like a performance. The quiet routine of a woman trying to keep a version of her life intact when the foundation beneath it was beginning to crack. Later that afternoon, I stood at the sink washing dishes that didn't need to be washed, staring blankly through the window as Cedric knelt among the roses. He wasn't smiling now. His face was drawn, distant, the way it used to look only after funerals or when he talked about his childhood losses. A strange sensation crawled under my skin. The distance between us, though only a pane of glass and a few yards of lawn, felt like miles. He hadn't come in for lunch. He usually did. Not hungry, he had called through the open window when I asked. I nodded even though he wasn't looking and returned to my chores like I was under some spell. By evening, when the sky turned orange and the first stars blinked above the rooftops, Cedric finally came inside. He smelled faintly of earth and roses. He washed up without a word, and we shared dinner in silence. Just the clink of silverware, the muted scrape of plates. "I'm thinking of building a small greenhouse," he said suddenly, as if we were in the middle of a conversation. I blinked. "It'll help keep the roses through winter." I nodded slowly, unsure what to say. The sound of his voice, casual and soft, contrasted so sharply with the storm that churned inside me. "That sounds nice," I said finally. He smiled briefly, then returned his attention to his food. That smile, faint, mechanical, carried none of the warmth I'd seen on his face when Lilia stood beside him in the garden. That night, after he'd fallen asleep, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The same soft breathing, the same peaceful expression on his face. But everything felt different now. I turned onto my side, facing away from him. My thoughts swirled relentlessly, looping back over the clues I hadn't seen, the moments I'd dismissed, the instincts I had silenced. I remembered how Lilia used to come to me, eager to learn recipes that she never actually cooked, how she asked questions about marriage but never seemed to listen to the answers. I had thought she was just lonely, unsure about her future with Judd. I had thought I was helping. But now, every word, every visit, every lingering glance at Cedric, all of it felt like part of something I hadn't understood. And that triumphant smile she gave at dinner when she announced the pregnancy and looked straight at me, it hadn't been a smile of joy. It had been something else. A challenge, maybe. A victory. I lay there in the dark, feeling the slow burn of betrayal twist tighter around my chest. Not just from Cedric, not just from Lilia, but from myself. Because somewhere deep down, I had known. I had felt it for weeks, maybe months. I had just refused to believe it, and now I couldn't unknow what I knew. Tomorrow, I would have to decide what came next. But tonight, I let the weight of it settle over me like a second skin. Heavy, inevitable. The truth had finally found its way in, and nothing, not the quiet garden, not Cedric's familiar face, not even my own will to pretend, could shut it out again. That evening, something about Cedric was different, subtly but undeniably so. There was a weight missing from his presence, as if something had been lifted off him. It was in the way his shoulders sat more loosely, the way his tone carried a touch more lightness. At dinner, he was almost cheerful, talkative, animated in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. He rambled on about the garden, about new plans for the spring, and how thrilled he was at the idea of becoming a grandfather. I watched him carefully, scrutinizing his every expression, every gesture, searching for any sign of guilt, deceit, anything that might betray a hidden truth. But what I saw in his face wasn't guilt. It looked like relief. "Lilia stopped by today," I said cautiously, testing his reaction. Cedric didn't flinch. He simply nodded, calm, his hands steady as he cut his pork chop. "Yeah, sweet girl. She's a bit anxious about the pregnancy. Wanted some reassurance." "What kind of reassurance?" I asked, watching him closely. For the briefest moment, his knife paused in mid-cut. Then he resumed, "Oh, first-time mother nerves, wondering if she'll be good at it, if the baby will be healthy, the usual things." But nothing about Lilia had ever seemed usual, and I was beginning to believe that this pregnancy was the most unusual thing of all. That night, as Cedric slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, my mind refusing to rest. The uncertainty was like a stone in my chest, cold and heavy. I couldn't keep living like this, not knowing what was real, what was lie, and what lay hidden behind each smile or kiss. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. Because the pain of facing the truth could never be as cruel as the slow erosion of trust caused by lies. In the morning, I would start my search in earnest. The investigation began in Cedric's study. It was Wednesday, and he'd left for his weekly doctor's appointment as usual. I waited until the car was out of the driveway before heading upstairs. The study door, thick oak and slightly warped from age, groaned softly as I pushed it open. Even though I lived in this house, I felt like a trespasser crossing a boundary I'd always respected. His study had always been his haven, a space that was his alone. I had rarely entered it without an invitation, And now I wondered what price I'd paid for that courtesy. The room smelled faintly of Cedric's aftershave and the comforting musk of old books. Everything was in place, papers aligned in neat stacks, books categorized and shelved, his worn leather chair angled perfectly to catch the morning sunlight. I began with his desk, my hands trembling slightly. The top drawer yielded nothing unusual, just pens, paper clips, stray business cards from doctors and contractors. The second drawer was more the same. Bills, letters, all mundane and above board. But the bottom drawer, tucked beneath a few gardening magazines, I found something that didn't belong. A bundle of bank statements. Not from our joint account, but from a separate one I had no idea existed. I flipped through them, breath catching as the numbers began to register. Deposits, large ones, 5,000, at 8,000, even 12,000 at irregular intervals. And the withdrawals? Always in cash, always in clean round figures. 2,000, 3,500, 7,000. Where had this money come from? And where had it gone? Hands shaking, I took out my phone and began photographing the statements. My fingers fumbled so badly that I had to retake several of them to get a clear image. When I was done, I returned everything to its original position and shut the drawer with care. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was still missing, something just out of reach. A sound from the driveway caught my attention. I moved to the window, peeking through the curtain. Not Cedric's sedan, Lilia's silver car. I watched as she stepped out, dressed casually in jeans and a fitted sweater that emphasized her curves. But she didn't head to the front door. Instead, she rounded the side of the house, heading toward the back garden. My pulse quickened. This was my chance. I moved downstairs quietly and positioned myself in the kitchen, where I could see through the wide window that overlooked the garden. There, near the old oak, Marcus was raking leaves. Lilia approached him directly, her stride confident. They began talking. Their body language shocked me. Far too familiar, far too easy. I hadn't realized they knew each other this well. The exchange was short but intense. Marcus kept shaking his head, clearly reluctant, while Lilia seemed to be pushing something, insisting. Then, from her purse, she pulled out what looked like an envelope. Marcus looked around nervously, then took it and slipped it into his jacket. My heart stopped. Money. She was giving him money. Cedric handled all the household expenses, including Marcus' salary. Why would Lilia be paying him directly? Before I had time to think more, another car pulled into the driveway, Judd's blue Honda. I watched as my son stepped out, smiling and relaxed. Lilia turned the moment she saw him, breaking away from Marcus with that practiced, sparkling smile. "Surprise!" I heard her call, arms flung around him. Judd laughed, spinning her with easy affection. "What are you doing here, beautiful?" he asked. "I wanted to check on the garden with Marcus," she answered smoothly. "You know how I've been wanting to learn more about plants since we found out about the baby." It sounded innocent, perfectly reasonable. But I'd seen the envelope. I'd seen Marcus's eyes dart around like a man being watched. This wasn't about gardening. As they walked toward the house, I hurried to the living room and picked up a magazine, pretending to be absorbed in it. Moments later, they entered through the front door, Judd's arm wrapped lovingly around his wife's waist. They were radiant with happiness. "Mom," Judd said, "look who I caught conspiring with Marcus." "Conspiring?" I echoed with a light laugh, forcing ease into my voice. Lilia laughed too, her laugh, that delicate musical note that always struck me as a little too polished, too rehearsed. "I was just asking Marcus about flowers for the baby's room," she said sweetly. "I thought it might be nice to plant a small garden for our little one." Our little one. But the baby wasn't Judd's, was it? "That's a lovely idea," I heard myself say, the words automatic. "Marcus knows a lot about plants." "He really does," Lilia agreed, her eyes locking with mine. There was something in her gaze, something cool, unflinching, as if daring me to challenge her. "He's been so helpful. So understanding." It was the way she said understanding that made my stomach turn. It was heavy with something unsaid, something darker. They stayed for lunch. Judd talked nonstop about baby gear and plans, his excitement bubbling over. Lilia was quiet, her smile subdued, her attention drifting constantly toward the kitchen window, the one that faced the garden, where Marcus was still working. She wasn't her usual confident self. She seemed edgy, distracted. "You okay, sweetheart?" Judd asked, noticing. "Just tired," she replied quickly. "Pregnancy hormones, you know." But I wasn't convinced. Tired wasn't what I saw on her face. I saw calculation, tension, the worry of someone whose carefully arranged chessboard was beginning to shift out of her control. After they left, I watched Marcus from the window for another hour. He moved like a man under pressure, his rake stuttering through the leaves, his eyes darting toward the street, the house, his truck parked by the curb. Whatever was in that envelope had clearly shaken him. That evening, Cedric came home from his appointment, but the lightness he'd carried the night before was gone. He was distant again, quiet. He barely touched his dinner. Face. Was it surprise, annoyance, calculation? It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it, but I knew I hadn't. Her mask slipped just for a second. She set the cup down gently, folding her hands in front of her like she was preparing for a business meeting. "I thought he had a right to know," she said evenly. "Cedric has always been very supportive. I was scared." Judd's reaction, I wasn't sure how he'd take it. He's been under a lot of pressure lately. "But you didn't give him a chance," I said quietly. "You went behind his back." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Are you saying I did something wrong?" "I'm saying it doesn't feel right," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart was thudding in my chest, but I kept my gaze locked with hers. Lilia leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other in a motion too casual, too choreographed. "I didn't realize we were assigning blame now. I thought you'd be happy about the baby." "I want to be," I said honestly. "But there's something going on, Lilia, something you're not telling us. All these secrets." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Secrets? Every family has them, even yours." It was a warning wrapped in a smile. I felt it like a slap, and still I pushed forward. "Whose name is on the emergency fund?" I asked. "The one for $12,000? Her eyes narrowed again, sharper this time. "You've been snooping." I didn't deny it. "Answer the question." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. "I think this conversation's over." I stood too, my hands trembling at my sides. "You're not leaving until you tell me what's really going on." She didn't flinch. "Or what, Bessie? You'll tell Judd? Tell Cedric? You think they'll believe you over me?" There it was, the real Lilia. Cold, calculating, dangerous. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. "I don't need them to believe me," I said, my voice low. "I just need the truth." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful what you dig up. Some things are better left buried." And then she turned and walked out of my kitchen, but like she hadn't just threatened me. As the front door clicked shut behind her, I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly weak. I felt like I just stared down a predator. My mind was racing, but one thing was crystal clear. Lilia had been orchestrating something far bigger than a secret pregnancy. There were lies here, deep ones. And if I didn't get to the bottom of them soon, I was terrified what it might cost us. Staring blankly at the wallpaper, which suddenly looked unfamiliar, like I'd never really seen it before. My hands were trembling, my tea had gone cold beside me, and a hollow ache had started blooming somewhere deep inside my chest. Every word from that conversation kept echoing in my mind, looping over and over, each one sharper than the last. I had invited her in, welcomed her, smiled politely as she poured herself tea in my kitchen, all while plotting something that could shatter everything I loved. And Cedric, my partner, my anchor. He had looked at her with guilt, with weariness, not passion, not love, but with the burden of knowing a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. I couldn't stop replaying the way Lilia had looked at me, her charm unraveling slowly, expertly, until what remained was pure calculation. She hadn't denied anything, not once. Instead, she'd leaned into the role of the puppeteer, pulling every string with absolute confidence. Her performance had been flawless, until Marcus cracked. Marcus, with his trembling voice and pleading eyes, was the only one who had told the truth without any games. His guilt was raw, human, and it gave weight to everything he said. He had nothing to gain. And what he revealed left me breathless. Gambling debts, $100,000 owed to dangerous people. My son, pulled into the depths of addiction and financial ruin. And Lilia, no, not a victim, not a helpless wife. The instigator, the one who encouraged the bets, who opened the doors to the chaos and then stood back waiting to collect. She had built a story where Judd was the one at fault, where Cedric's silence could be twisted into complicity. She hadn't just manipulated Judd, she had used him, trapped him in a cage of shame and debt, then handed Cedric the key and told him he could never use it, not without burning down everything they'd built. And Cedric, oh God, Cedric had listened. He had kept that secret. He had protected Judd from the truth, even as it slowly poisoned us all. And then the final blow. The child she was carrying wasn't Judd's, it was Marcus's. My mind couldn't even fully process that piece of information. My body reacted first, nausea rising in my throat, my limbs heavy, leaden. She had stood there smug, one hand resting lightly on her stomach like a cruel reminder of just how much control she believed she had. Not just over Judd, not just over Cedric, but now over the future of this entire family. And the worst part? She was right. The silence after her mock applause had been unbearable. Rain kept falling, and I barely noticed. Time warped, slowed, sped up, stopped again. I couldn't remember how long I stood there, how long I stared at Cedric and Marcus and Lilia, as if one of them might suddenly offer me a way out of this nightmare. But none of them did. Eventually they left, quietly, awkwardly, like children slinking away after breaking something valuable. Cedric had reached out to touch my arm, but I couldn't let him. Not then, maybe not ever again. I needed air. I needed to think. I needed to feel like something, anything, was still solid beneath my feet. Now, alone in the quiet of my living room, I realized I couldn't cripe Kita, not yet. There was too much rage, too much shock and disbelief swirling inside me like a storm. I had been blindsided, betrayed, not just by Lilia, but by everyone who had chosen silence over truth. Lilia had asked me mockingly what I planned to do now, and I didn't have an answer. But one thing was certain, whatever came next, it would not be forgiveness. It would not be forgetting. She had played a dangerous game with my family, and she thought she'd already won. She was wrong. He looked up, and for a moment I saw every year of our life together written in the weariness of his eyes. He looked like a man who had run out of strength, out of excuse, out of hope. I stepped into the room slowly, the DNA test still tucked in my pocket, crinkling faintly with each step like a secret begging to be heard. He didn't speak, just watched me, his mouth set in that thin line he used whenever he was bracing for something awful. And honestly, maybe it was awful, what I was about to say, what we were both going to have to face. I walked over and sat down on the edge of the armchair, the leather cool against my skin. I didn't pull out the test, not yet. Instead, I let the silence stretch, and then I spoke. I found something, I said quietly. Something I think you need to see. But before I show you, I need to know, are you ready to tell me everything? No more shielding, Judd. No more protecting anyone. Just the truth, Cedric. All of it. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing with effort. Then he nodded. Not a big, bold nod, just the smallest dip of his head. But it was enough. So I took the envelope out and handed it to him. He didn't ask what it was. His hands trembled as he opened it, his eyes scanning the lines, the percentages, the clinical detachment of the report that somehow still managed to gut us both. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. Marcus, he whispered, and then, almost inaudibly, she really went that far. She planned it all, I said, from the beginning, the affair, the lease, the pregnancy, and now this, insurance, leverage. Cedric covered his face with one hand, the paper still clutched in the other. God help us, he said, voice cracking. She was never in love with Judd. That whole relationship was a lie. She used him, used all of us. I stood up, needing to move, to do something, anything, to keep from drowning in the weight of it all. We can't keep pretending, Cedric. We can't let her hold this over us. He nodded again, slowly this time, as if every movement hurt. What do we do? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I know one thing, we tell Judd. We do it gently, carefully, but we tell him. And Marcus, we reach out to him too. He deserves to know. Cedric looked up at me then, and in his eyes I saw a flicker of something I hadn't seen in days, resolve. We'll do it together, he said. No more secrets. That night I lay in bed listening to the clock tick on the nightstand, each second like a heartbeat, steady and certain. The world outside was quiet, but inside me there was a storm of thoughts and fears and hard truths taking shape. We were standing on the edge of something that could shatter us or save us. But I knew this much, the lies had run their course, and it was time to begin the reckoning. Whether we came out whole on the other side, well, that was something only time could decide. Her eyes darted between us, calculating. She knew what was coming, even if Judd didn't. Well, she said with a forced little laugh, thankfully there's no confusion in our case. Of course not, I said sweetly, dabbing at my lips with a napkin. Still, I thought it would be fair to be thorough, just to be sure. For the baby's medical records. It's amazing what one tiny swab can reveal. I reached beneath the table and laid the folded paper gently beside my plate. It was silent except for the soft clink of silverware. Then slowly, deliberately, I slid the envelope across the table toward Judd. He blinked, then glanced at Lilia, clearly confused. What's this? A gift, I said. Clarity. He picked it up, opened the flap, and unfolded the sheet. His eyes scanned the results. I watched the confusion drain from his face, replaced by disbelief, then pain, then silence. Lilia's voice trembled. Judd, he looked up, expression unreadable. This says I'm not the father. No one breathed. Cedric kept his gaze on his plate, jaw tight. I remained composed, my hands folded in my lap. You had a DNA test done? Judd asked, voice shaking now, turning toward me. I found it, I said gently, in the upstairs bathroom. Lilia must have dropped it. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just cleaning up. And then I saw the name. Judd turned to Lilia. You knew. Lilia was white now, her lips parted as she struggled to speak. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could fix it. By lying, Judd's voice rose, sharp and wounded. By letting me think this was my child. I was scared, she said, tears rising now, playing the part of the wronged woman once more. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if we stayed together, it wouldn't matter. It does matter, he said, each word clipped, deliberate. It matters a hell of a lot. Cedric finally spoke, his voice steady but cold. She's been manipulating all of us, Judd. She knew about your debts. She used them. Judd turned, his eyes narrowing. What debts? Cedric sighed. The gambling. I tried to help you, quietly. I didn't want to shame you the way Bess was hurt by her father's choices. But she found out. She used it to get leverage. She pushed you deeper in, then offered a way out. But there was a price, her lies, her story, the illusion she built. Judd shook his head as though trying to make sense of a world suddenly upside down. This can't be happening. She's very good at playing the victim, I said softly, looking at Lilia, who had now buried her face in her hands. But she underestimated something. Judd's eyes met mine. What? Us, I said, your family. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Judd stood, folding the paper again and setting it down carefully, like it burned to the touch. I need some air, he muttered, walking toward the door. Judd, please, Lilia called after him, but her voice broke halfway. He didn't turn back. I stood and gathered the empty plates with a calm that surprised even me. Lilia remained frozen in her chair, her entire posture sagging. The performance had ended, and now only the truth remained on the stage. Cedric rose and moved beside me, his hand brushing mine. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. The years between us had forged a language of glances and quiet understanding. The storm had broken, and now, finally, we could begin to rebuild. She kept her composure, never letting her face betray the storm brewing inside her, such a strange subject to come up over dinner. Yet I didn't think it was out of place. I tilted my head thoughtfully. On the contrary, I find it quite relevant, I said. Then I rose from my seat and walked over to the sideboard where I had quietly placed a manila envelope before the meal began. My steps were calm, measured, but inside my chest, my heart thundered like a war drum, loud enough I feared they'd hear it. With deliberate care, I returned to the table and stood by my chair, the envelope in hand. I looked at her, at Lilia, and spoke softly, though there was steel beneath my words. "Leah, dear," I said, my voice composed but resolute. "I think you dropped something in my bathroom last week." Her complexion drained of all color. She sat frozen as I laid the envelope before her, opening it and revealing the document the DNA results, so cold, so clinical, seemed to glow beneath the chandelier's golden light, each line on that paper like a knife carving through the air. Judd reached for it, brows furrowed in confusion. "What is this?" he asked. "Don't," Lilia whispered, her voice barely audible, but it was already too late. I watched as my son's eyes scanned the document, saw the way confusion twisted slowly into comprehension, and then into heartbreak. His whole face seemed to collapse under the weight of it. No one spoke. The silence dragged on, thick with shattered trust and cruel realization. I don't understand," Judd finally said, his voice a fragile whisper. "Marcus Santos? Who is Marcus Santos?" "Our old gardener," Cedric replied quietly. Judd turned toward Lilia, his expression raw, desperate for some explanation that would make this all a mistake, a misunderstanding. But Lilia didn't move. She sat stiffly, caught between the urge to deny and the impossibility of hiding any longer. Her world, so carefully maintained, was beginning to crumble around her. "The baby isn't yours, son," I said gently. "It never was." And from there, everything fell apart. It was the most painful hour I have ever endured. Watching my son break, not just from the betrayal of the child, but from everything. He saw it all now. The crushing gambling debts that had made him easy to manipulate. The subtle traps Lilia had set to keep him dependent on her. The way his deepest shame had been used against him, turned into chains. Lilia tried to salvage what she could, spinning a tale as quickly as she could grasp it, about being vulnerable, about how Cedric had taken advantage of her. A desperate attempt to rewrite the past, but the words rang hollow, transparent. She couldn't twist her way out now. The paper had already spoken the truth. "You planned this," Judd said slowly, his voice low and shaking as the puzzle pieces came together. "You knew I had a gambling problem. You encouraged it." "I was trying to help you," Lilia pleaded. "By pushing me further into debt," he shot back. "By using my shame to blackmail my father into playing along with your lies?" She had no answer. "And Marcus?" Judd's voice cracked. Even saying the name seemed to hurt. "Did you seduce him too? Was he just another pawn in all of this?" "It wasn't supposed to happen," Lilia murmured, her voice barely there. I was lonely, and he was kind." "So you destroyed his life, too." That was when Cedric finally spoke. He looked at Judd, sorrow and love etched deep into his face. "Son," he said, "I need you to know, I never touched her. I let you believe I was having an affair because I couldn't bear to watch you deal with the consequences of your addiction. I thought I could protect you." Judd turned to his father, his eyes swimming with grief and gratitude. "Dad, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Cedric replied quietly. "You're my son. But I should have told your mother the truth. I should have believed that you were strong enough to face your own mistakes." What came next was swift and final. Lilia packed her bags that night. The suitcases stood by the door like monuments to everything that had gone wrong. She had nowhere to turn, no family willing to take her in, no friends untouched by the lies she had built her life upon. "But what about the baby?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice as Judd carried her luggage to the car. "You can't just abandon your grandchild." "The baby will be fine," I replied calmly. "I've already spoken with Marcus's sister in Phoenix. She's agreed to take you in until the baby is born. She'll help you get back on your feet." Lilia stared at me, stunned. "You arranged for me to go to Phoenix?" "I arranged for you to have a fresh start," I corrected her. "A chance to raise your child with honesty. No lies, no manipulation. What you do with that chance is entirely up to you. As her car drove away down our quiet street, I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a weary sadness for the pain that had been endured, and a quiet relief that the lies were finally over. 6 months later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a photograph, a baby boy with dark hair and Marcus's gentle eyes. On the back, in Lilia's handwriting, were the words, "His name is David. Thank you for giving me a second chance." Judd began attending Gamblers Anonymous not long after that night. He approached his recovery with the same unwavering determination he gave to everything else. Cedric and I, after so many years of dancing around the truth, found ourselves closer than ever, our marriage strengthened by the honesty we had reclaimed. And our true grandchild, the one born into love, not lies, came into the world 8 months after that terrible dinner. A beautiful little girl with Judd's dark eyes and Sarah's contagious laughter. I've come to believe that the greatest victories in life don't happen with fireworks or dramatic showdowns. They're quiet, subtle. They come when you choose truth over deception, forgiveness over bitterness, and love over fear. At 65, I learned it's never too late to fight for the people you love. And sometimes the strongest weapon a woman can wield is not fury or accusation, but the calm dignity of knowing her worth and refusing to let anyone take it from her. In the end, I didn't destroy Lilia. I simply took away her power to destroy us, and that was enough to change everything.